Levi Brackman here with Truth Jewish Wisdom for today. Thank you so much for joining. This is the Torah portion, uncensored portion of the podcast. If you like this podcast, please leave a review, like it, whether you listen to it on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else. Other people can find it that way. Also, forward it to other people if you'd like. That also broadens the listenership and the audience for this podcast. Thank you so much. Now that I've got that out of the way, let me jump right into the Torah portion at hand. This episode, we're talking about the portion of Matot, which is the penultimate portion of the book of Numbers of Bamidbar, and I'm going to jump straight into chapter 32, Perek Lamed Beis. And this is a story about the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad. All the Israelites are on the east side of the Jordan River, and they're looking forward to conquering the land of Canaan and then settling the land. And these two tribes come to Moses and they say to Moses, look, we have a lot of cattle and a lot of livestock, and we find that this part of the east of the Jordan River is very good and conducive for cattle to graze, and therefore let us stay here and not go over the Jordan River. And Moses' reaction to that is pretty severe. Moses straight away sees in this request echoes of what went on 40 years earlier with the story of the spies, when the spies went to spy out the land of Israel, and they came back and they said, this is going to be too hard of a task for us to do. We can't conquer this land. The people are too strong, etc., etc. And they turned the hearts of the Israelites away from wanting to go and conquer the land. And because of this, God got very upset with them, and they ended up wandering in the desert for 40 years until a whole new generation was born, and that generation was going to go into the land of Israel. Now you find two of these tribes are saying, no, we actually also don't want to go into the land of Israel. And therefore Moses gets very, very upset with them. I'm going to want to focus on here is the question that they asked Moses about staying on the east side of the Jordan River, and then what Moses responds, and then how they then respond to Moses. So I want to look at these verses a little bit. You can see that at the end, they say to Moses, this is verse 5, or Pasuk Hey, Vayomru. They said to Moses, after telling Moses that they have a lot of cattle, and that they want a good place for the cattle to be able to graze and pasture, and that is suitable on the east side of the Jordan River. And they said, if we have found favor in your eyes, yutan es haaretz hazois lavodecha la'achuza al tavirenu seyarden, give this land to us, to your servants, in other words, to us, as an inheritance. Al tavirenu seyarden, do not cause us to go over the Jordan River. So it seems very clear that they don't want to go over the Jordan River. Now, there's a lot of discussion about what did they really mean here. Did they mean they don't want to go over the Jordan River at all? They don't want to at all fight the Canaanites, and they just want to stay here? Or do they mean we just want to establish a place of living here, but we will also go and fight Canaanites and help the rest of the Israelites conquer the land? But we find that Moses doesn't understand them to mean that they're going to conquer with the Israelites. He seems to understand that what they mean is that they want to stay there and establish their homes on the east side of the Jordan River and not go over to the west side of the Jordan River at all. So Moses goes on his complaint against them, and he basically says, how can you do this? This was a mistake which was already made once, and how could you be making the same mistake again? And then we find in verse number 16, Pasuk Tesvav, that after Moses has said all of that, Vayiksho Elov Vayimro Gidris Soin Nivne Lemikneinu Poi V'arim Latapeno. So Vayiksho Elov, and they came closer to him. In other words, the children of Reuben and Gad came closer. They approached Moses, and they said to him, we will build a place for our cattle here and cities for our children. And then v'anachnon necholetz chushim lifnei b'nei Yisrael ad ashim havioinum elam koimam v'yoshav tapena b'ari hamivtzar b'pnei yesh v'aretz. And basically says, we will then, once we've got our children and our cattle established here, we will then, go and take on our armory, and we will fight with the Israelites. So we will, in fact, go to the other side of the Jordan. So there is a discussion whether this was Moses misunderstanding what they meant. They really meant that we want to stay here, or was Moses understanding them correctly, and then they changed their mind after Moses made that argument. They said, no, actually, you know what, you're right, we will go and fight with the Israelites. So there's different ways in which to view that, and there's discussions and analysis of the text to bring proof this way and that way in the commentators and those who analyze the text. Now, what I want to talk about is something slightly different here, which is I want to focus on these words, Vayikshu Elov, Vayomru. And they approached Elov to him. They approached to him, and they said. And this text didn't just say the children of Reuben and the children of Gad just responded immediately to Moses. Instead, it says, and they approached Moses. Now, where else have we find a very famous place of the approaching of somebody to somebody else? And that is found in Genesis. You find in Genesis chapter 42, Perek Mem Dalet, Vayigash Elav Yehuda Vayomer. Very similar words. And Judah approached him and he said, and this is the famous story of when Joseph was the viceroy of Egypt, and he had all the storehouses of all the grain, and there was a famine in the land, and the brothers had come down to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph. And Joseph hid this silver goblet in the sack of grain that belonged to Benjamin, and it's found. And Joseph basically says to the brothers, the person who stole this is going to have to be imprisoned with me, and therefore this is now going to be Benjamin who's going to be imprisoned with him. And the words which he uses, and Judah says to Joseph, because you found this silver goblet in the sack of Benjamin, therefore also us and also the person who the goblet was found in his sack will be slaves to you. And the response which Joseph says, no way. He says, verse 17, Pasuk Yudzam, V'yom echalili mi'asos zois ha'esh asher nimsa ha'gaviyah b'yadi hoye li oved v'atem alu l'shalom al avichem. He says, no, I would never do that. I wouldn't just take slaves to the person who didn't do anything wrong. Only the person that the goblet was found in his hand, he will be a slave for me, and you now should ascend to peace to your fathers. So in other words, he's saying, I'm going to take Benjamin as a slave now because he stole the goblet. And everyone understands what is happening here, that the brothers many years ago had sold Joseph into slavery, and he wants to see whether the brothers had truly changed, and whether now they would abandon Benjamin, who was the youngest, like they had abandoned him many years previously. So that is the setup here that Joseph is setting up. He's setting up to see, has these people, have they truly repented? Are they reformed individuals? Will they not make the same mistake that they made previously of abandoning him, and therefore also not abandon their brother Benjamin? And the turning point in this conversation is the next verse, verse 18, which is the beginning of the parsha of Vayigash. And verse 18 says, Vayigash Elav Yehuda, and Judah approached to him, to who? To Joseph in this case. And he said, Bi Adoni, Yidabrina avdecha davo be'oznei Adoni, please my master, let me please talk to my servant a thing in the ears of my servants. And do not get angry because you are like Pharaoh. So this is an approach where he starts off and talking to Joseph, and he basically is now going to show Joseph that he's actually going to stand up to protect his brother Benjamin. And that's how the story actually continues until eventually Joseph can no longer contain himself, and he reveals himself to his brothers. Ani Yosef Oida Vichai, I am Joseph, is my father still alive? And that very, very emotional reunion that happened between Joseph and his brothers ensued from that. But the turning point where Judah was showing Joseph that I've repented, I'm no longer the old Judah, we're no longer the same people who sold you into slavery many years ago. We're reformed. We've repented. We're better people today. And today we're going to prove you that, because we're going to stand up to protect our brother Benjamin. So I think this language of Vayikshu Elav, and they approached him, it is a language which is used by the Torah to signify some kind of change. And I think that this is like a pivotal moment where there's now an approach which is being made, an approach of showing some kind of change within the individuals, that maybe historically they were one way, but now they're actually going to approach the same situation very differently. In the previous case, in the case of Genesis, it was Judah approaching Joseph after Joseph had basically shown them and set them up to make the same mistake they made previously. And now they're going to take a different approach to it. And here it is the case of the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad also approaching Moses to show that whilst historically a mistake was made, this case is very different. Historically, the case was made that the people, when they said they didn't want to go into the land of Israel at all, they made it very clear, we want to stay in the desert. They would have preferred even to have gone back to Egypt than fight to go into the land of Israel. So that was what happened then. Moses wanted to see, have these people changed? The second he sees that these people are coming to him and talking to him about staying on the east side of the Jordan River, he's worried immediately that perhaps within them is a certain remnant of their ancestors, of their parents, who had sinned with the sin of the spies and had said they didn't want to go into the land of Israel at all. So Moses wanted to test them out, just like Joseph wanted to test them out, testing out his brothers. So it could be, one might argue, that it wasn't a misunderstanding here. Moses wasn't misunderstanding them. Moses understood there's a good chance, in fact, they didn't mean that they didn't want to just stay in the east side of the Jordan River and not go and fight on behalf of the rest of the Israelites at all. Maybe he understood that. But he wanted to test them. Have they really been reformed? Are they totally new people or not? And therefore, he asked them these very searching questions and wanted to see how they would respond to it. And the way they responded to it in that pivotal moment, Vayikshu Elav, and they approached him. They approached Moses. Vayomru, and they said, and this is the beginning of showing a reformed people. They're willing to put their life on the line for their brethren. Just like Judah was willing to put his life on the line for Benjamin. These were the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, saying, no. You've no reason for any kind of misunderstanding here. We are totally reformed people. Yes, we like the land here. We like the fact that it's really suitable for pasture. And we have a lot of livestock which need good pasture. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to fight with Israelites. We want to fight with Israelites. We want to go into this land. We want to make sure that the Israelites have a land and are able to fulfill the promise which started with the Exodus from Egypt to going into the promised land, where we can have all those mitzvot and all the commandments which are associated with the land can be fulfilled in the land, and we're willing to fight for that so that it can be created, the holy nation on the holy land. So this is really, I think, what's probably going on here. Again, in my view of this, it's not that Moses misunderstood. It's that Moses was probing to see, are these people really the same people or not? Or have they changed? Just like Joseph was probing by having the goblet placed in the sack of Benjamin and then having it found and then confronting the rest of the brothers with the possibility that Benjamin would end up being enslaved in Egypt, just like many years before. Joseph was abandoned by his brothers and enslaved in Egypt. He gave them the opportunity to abandon him again. Vayikshu Elav Yehuda, and Judah came up and said, no, we're no longer those people. In a similar case, you have the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben who are saying, yes, we'd like to stay on the east side of the river. And Moses saying, what do you mean? Are you the same people as you once were? Are you the same as your ancestors? Vayikshu Elav Vayomru, and they approached him and they said, no. We're not making that same mistake. We're reformed. We're willing to fight for our brethren. And this is really relevant today, where we live in the time where Israel, the land of Israel, is in the hands of the Jewish people. And people have to fight for their brothers. It's just the way it is as Jews. We have to be able to fight for our brothers. Now, we live in Galut, in exile. I live here in America. And what kind of fighting can we do? Well, we all have an obligation to fight in our own way for the land of Israel. We can't abandon our brothers. Just like Joseph was making sure that Judah and the brothers wouldn't abandon Benjamin, we have an obligation not to abandon our brothers in the land of Israel. And we have to fight for them as well. And whatever that means, whether it means talking on behalf of Israel, explaining the fact that the Jews have a right to live in the land of Israel, and this is our land, and all the lies, the many multitude of lies, blood libels which are said about the Jewish people, we need to combat those in any possible way we can. And although flights have been cancelled and we had a trip planned to go to Israel the next few weeks, we didn't back down. We made sure to rebook our flights because we're going to Israel. We're going to the land. This is our land. We don't live on the east side of the Jordan. Our land is on the west side of the Jordan. People don't understand that Jewish people without the land of Israel just can't exist. The land of Israel is central to what it means to be a Jew, is central to our religion. It's not just, the religion is not just a religion of rituals. Without the land of Israel, you don't have a Judaism in many, many ways. So this is our obligation to fight for the land of Israel in every possible way we can. Now, we also have an election coming up, and we're in election season here in the United States of America. And to me, there's a very clear way of thinking about this. There are candidates and parties which are more pro-Israel and are more conducive to our fight for the land of Israel, and there are those which are less conducive to that. And as we go to the ballot box, we have to be thinking, as Jews, although we might be currently living, because there's good pasture here, on the east side of the Jordan, not in the land of Israel properly, we do not and should never abandon our brethren in their fight for living in the land of Israel, in our homeland as Jewish people. And with that, I wish for peace and safety in the land of Israel. This has been Levi Brackman with Truths, Jewish Wisdom for the Day. Thank you so much for joining, and until next time.